Hey, this is Derek Murphy of creativity.com. I just got access to GPT-4, so I'm going to make a video talking about how to use it for book writing, specifically for fiction. I previously made some comparisons with, or some tests with using ChatGPT and GPT-3 DaVinci, which is 3.5. And I put those up on Creativity with some kind of real quick samples of what this is capable of, because when GPT came out in December of 2022, it was good enough that it scared a lot of people, and I kind of suspected that it was going to get much better really quickly. So here we are already in March 2023. GPT-4 is able to produce very good writing, very good fiction quality, literary writing. And although there's a conversation to be had about, can it write a whole book on its own unprompted? Maybe not yet, but it can do some really insane things that authors have never had tools to take advantage of before. So we've had to pay for developmental editors or writing coaches, or, spend way too much time and energy writing a book because it's really, really hard. These are some tools that are going to make a lot of those pieces of process easier to deal with and more fun. So, of course, that could be really dangerous if we get too used to it being easy and takes away the difficulty of writing books. But there's also a difference between, writing books as a business to make money because you want to write the best entertainment for a large body of readers versus, doing it for yourself and doing it for expression and creativity as an art where you don't really care about the money. So you may not want help like this, but I think most authors, no matter how long you've been writing, you probably realize that it's harder than it needs to be, and you have to spend all your time managing your energy and your motivation so you don't procrastinate all the time. This is stuff that could help. So I'm not going to actually write an entire book right now with GPT-4, but I will show you the experiments that I've done and how you could use it to write a pretty good first draft. It really all comes down to the prompts. You need to get very specific, but it can also keep track of history. So this is the big deal about ChatGPT versus other forms of AI tools, is that I can chat with it down here and it can remember the thread and the history. So theoretically, I could have it write chapter 1 and it would remember chapter 1 and then go on to write chapter 2, chapter 3. I've also had pretty good luck putting in chapter 1 and then having it continue the story and keep track of my characters, my writing style, my voice. So because I'm kind of a slow writer with a lot of open project, I was excited about, maybe I can take my book 1s and finish my book 2s and book 3s and round out a series a lot faster than I would get to it on my own. And if the style sounds like my writing, and I'll of course do a heavy edit and proofread on it, not just proofread, I do really, really heavy revision. So even if I get out a first draft and it takes me a couple months, I might spend, 3 more months just rewriting it, which I don't necessarily want to do all the time. I appreciate that's part of the process, and I want to have the best books that I put out there with my name on them. But if I could speed that process up and do less work to get my writing up to that level that I expect it to be, I would take the shortcut. Because mostly I just want to share my stories with people. I want them to be good enough quality, but I don't care if, I've put in 100 hours or I've put in 20 hours to getting them to that quality. All right, sorry for the long preamble. I'm going to go down here real quick to show you. Recently, I've been revising some of my novels, so I want to redo my blurbs. It does a pretty good job already of rewriting my blurb, so I can put in my original blurb that I had, which is okay. And the nice thing is I can tell it to try again and add more things, rewrite it in this style, rewrite it, but add more romance, and kind of keep working on it until I've got a pretty strong blurb. This worked great, and this was 3.5, so GPT-4 is already better. It also does some cool things. For example, it can make tables. So I wanted it to have, the most famous books and their average word count and page count, and it made this for me, which is pretty amazing. It saves me a ton of time in research. I could copy paste this into a blog post. However, it is true that ChatGPT tends to lie sometimes. So I don't know for sure if these are even true or where it's getting this information. Anything that's kind of fact-based, you might want to check up on. So here's the first experiment that I did from a friend of mine who gave me this prompt. I put in my own name, which I probably shouldn't have, but I asked it to give me 10 different steampunk-inspired short story ideas. And crucially, I said, you choose the plot, antagonist, and plot twists. So in 3.5, it couldn't have done this. But in GPT-4, it gives me the title, it gives me the plot, the antagonist, and a plot twist. These plot twists are pretty good. These are reasonably good ideas. So in terms of just getting a premise for a potential story with the plot twist, this works really well. And the next thing that I did was try to train it on a plot outline. There's a lot of different plotting formulas like Save the Cat or Romancing the Beat, which are just kind of structures to help you get all the content in the right places so that you can focus on the writing. I have my own version, which is a 24-chapter plot outline. So I told it I was going to give it the plot outline. Please learn it, confirm you understand. I didn't do too well of a prompt here, so it started to just write right away, which is not what I wanted because I hadn't finished training it yet. So sometimes I had to be like, stop, correct it, you got it wrong, you're doing the wrong thing, and then try again. But here I put in the 24-chapter plot outline. This is a 4-act plot outline, which means all of the stuff in the middle is filled in. A lot of other plotting outlines, they leave a lot of gaps that you don't really know how to fix. So my plot outline is a little bit more robust. It works really good for stuff like this. So I taught it my 24 plot outline. I just realized I must have miscounted or made a mistake or something because it should have more chapters than that. But anyway, here is the story that it started writing. So this is using my exact plot outline very, very clearly and well. It's got it numbered. It's got the same headings and everything, but it does a good job. This is a very detailed story that I could write, or I could try to get ChatGPT4 to write with, all the stakes. There is a limitation right now for GPT, which I think is 4,000 tokens. It might have been pushed up to 6,000 tokens. The other really exciting thing is that rumors are some version of GPT-4 will have a 32,000 token limit. So right now it might be like, you might have to try to get it to write 1,000 words, which is a little bit on the long side, but you can continue a big thread like this. And when it runs out of space, you just say, continue the above, and it'll keep writing from where it left off. But 32,000 tokens would be more like, it's about 75%. So it would be more like 20,000 words or something. If I could put in 20,000 words of my content and then get to train it more on my writing style and have it keep writing, that would obviously be a game changer. It gave me a pretty good twist here with a shocking revelation. One of the rebel leaders is a traitor secretly working for Lord Redford. It gave me the antagonist. It gives me a best friend, possible romantic interest. So all of this stuff is usable content. Nothing amazing. I mean, in terms of, the writing here isn't amazing, but this is just an outline. It's not about the writing. And structure-wise, this is a complete 24-chapter plot structure that is usable. Like, I could see myself publishing this story. So what I tried to do next is get it to write a specific chapter. So I'll point out that I used some author names here, which is not something you really should do when you're using AI tools. This is just an example, so I wanted to try to get the best output that I could. You can get similar output without using author names, but it's kind of just a quicker way to communicate the style or the genre that you want. It won't ever plagiarize any of these authors. It won't actually write in their styles. It might just get a little bit closer to understanding the style that you're looking for. But it is a bit dodgy. So if you were doing things commercially or publicly, I wouldn't actually use an author name like this if I was actually writing a book that I plan to publish. It's not illegal, so I'm sure a lot of people will do it. It's just controversial because this is very new technology, and it does make it a little bit too easy for piracy concerns, where somebody could put in a plot outline and put in, I want a book exactly like this particular author, and they might get a book that's, pretty good and well written, and the style is sort of similar to that author, unless they're trying to sell it as that author's work or pass it off as that author's work. None of the words will be the same. It won't be a copy or plagiarized version of that author's story. So it's complicated. It's a ethically gray issue, although it's not really a legally gray issue. There's still a lot of conversation about the ethics and the morals of writing with GPT-3 at all. It's a hot topic, and there's a lot of upset authors and artists, which is fair, and you want to be careful to be sensitive. But at the same time, I kind of felt like I was too far ahead of the game, and I was the last 2 or 3 months, I haven't been very vocal about AI tools because I know there's a lot of controversy. But this week, GPT-4 just came out. So we've been saying, GPT-3 is almost good enough to write full books. It will be soon. A lot of authors are saying it's going to be years before it can actually do it. GPT-4 is here right now. And the quality, as I'll show you, is much better than most people expect. And the legal stuff isn't really a question of debate, because also this week, it's been implemented inside of Quora, inside of Pro Writing Aid. Grammarly just announced it. So a lot of editing and writing tools that most people are already using are putting this technology into their services already. It's unlikely that it's going to be removed based on copyright issues like this, because it isn't against copyright, or it depends a little bit about the country that you're in. I've heard some countries might take more of an action. I think it's possible, like one solution for Midjourney is that they just ban the use of any specific names. I could see that sort of happening in this case, where they ban specific author names. I don't think that actually will happen, but that would be a potential solution in the future. It's good to understand the risks. Also, talking about copyright, the way that it works so far, to my knowledge, is that you can use anything you create with AI tools for commercial purposes, but you can't own the copyright because it was built off of not even public domain work, but private work that was scraped on the internet. Even so, I would recommend, nobody's going to get the exact same novel if they put it into GPT-4, and you want to use really specific, diverse prompts to get good results that are different and have an internal logic and an internal consistency, which isn't the same as anybody else might put out. But you also don't want to just, publish something that GPT-4 spit out without a lot of revision and editing and attention. I wouldn't trust the robots to write the book yet, but I do trust the robots as a helpful co-writing tool that allows me to put out more ideas. Anyway, that's just an explainer, because I really don't recommend putting author names like this at all, but I wanted you to see the results and the quality differences of what might come out. So I asked it to write the first chapter of the outline that it gave me up above. This was its first attempt. This is GPT-4. You don't really have time to read all of this. I will put samples up on creativeindie.com. I'm also going to put up the best prompts for fiction writers. I'll make a big post of it and link under this video. This is kind of a middle grade, young adult, epic fantasy steampunk adventure. Some of it's pretty good already. It's not amazing, but down here, Lena grabbed his hand and pulled him onto the roof, the wind tousling her auburn hair. That was a close call. What did you do this time? Derek flashed her a mischievous grin. I might have borrowed a few gears and cogs from the city's most insufferable bureaucrat. By borrowed, I assume you mean stole, Lena asked, raising her eyebrow. So that's kind of like cliche, but it fits really well with the genre, and it's not terrible dialogue and banter. Compared to like what a very rough draft, an early rough draft might look like, this is almost a near to polished final draft that would be close to publishable. Even this part up here, he glanced over his shoulder, catching sight of the guards' menacing silhouettes, their brass badges glinting in the dim gaslight. Derek gritted his teeth and hurled the grappling hook skyward. It latched onto the metal railing with a satisfying clank. He tightened his grip on the contraption. The device whirled to life, hoisting him upward just as the guards rounded the corner. That's a pretty tight paragraph, with a lot of not fancy prose or fancy words, but it does flow really smoothly. It's very visual and descriptive. The only thing is that with ChatGPT4, also with ChatGPT, the earlier version, it has trouble with chapters because it wants to finish the story. So it switches into narration, stuff like this. Unbeknownst to them, this discovery would set them on a path filled with adventure, danger, and the possibility of changing the world forever. So this is kind of like narrative additions to the actual story. And with most novels, you want to stay in the scene and you want to break when the action ends. So promising him answers, hope, maybe even the key to a better life. This is stuff that would work in a blurb or a plot summary, but doesn't really work in the active scene. So I asked it to try again. I wanted to try to get it to write more content. So I asked it to slow it down and write at least 1,000 words for each scene, 2,000 words altogether. It tried again. It did break the scene in a pretty good spot, which is nice. I like to have 2 scenes in my chapters. It did add some more description, which I like. As they moved through the city, Derek couldn't help but marvel at the mechanical marvels that surrounded them. Clockwork birds flitted from one rooftop to another, their delicate wings beating in perfect synchronization. Steam-powered carriages rumbled along the cobblestone streets, their brass fittings gleaming in the gaslight. Pretty nice. And then it also gets into some backstory and some world building and stuff, which is not terrible, but also takes you kind of out of the narrative. I said it's still not long enough. Try to write at least 3,000 words. Don't stop until it's at least 3,000 words. That doesn't always work either. So in this case, it's mostly the same story. It didn't really add much. It just kept writing. And because I didn't tell it what to write, it kind of just moved into narration, some narrative summary. So it continued as like a bird's eye view summary of the plot, and it moved way ahead in that plot outline. So they go to, they flee into the night, they find a secret society, as they hone their skills and forge new alliances, as the rebellion swelled in strength in numbers, as the Clockwork Rebellion gained momentum. It's not exactly repetition, but it kind of is getting there, where none of this is really usable scene, but it's usable content in terms of like a summary or to have an idea of where the story is going, or a summary of the plot twists and turns. There's some good stuff in here and some good writing, but it's not active scene for a chapter. So I asked it to slow down. I said it was going too fast. Start from chapter 2. I wanted to see if it could go back and pick up the outline again. And it did a pretty good job of getting back to the right place and then continuing the narrative. It does get a little tricky. There are better prompts. I'm sure this was just my first attempt. There are better prompts to get it to write things out. And you could also train it a lot in more detail. So by training it, because it keeps track of the history, we could go in and say, let's generate 20 characters. Let's generate 20 different cool visual scenes. The premises, the plot twists, all of that stuff could be world building, research stuff before I actually get into writing the chapters, and then would have more resources to remember and to draw on, and also to keep track of internal logistics and consistency. As an experiment, I also tried rewrite this in the literary style of Laini Taylor's Strange the Dreamer. This is a young adult novel that I like. I think Laini Taylor has a really beautiful, evocative, descriptive style. Some people might call it lyrical prose. It's not my style of writing, so I wouldn't use this in a book myself. But I feel like a lot of authors, they think this like simple commercial style is too easy, and they prefer, fancy purple prose and stuff. So I wanted to see if ChatGPT4 could handle more of a lyrical, poetic style of writing, and it does do a pretty good job here. This is sort of halfway between my earlier attempts and a new style that's a lot more visual, a lot more descriptive. But it does still end in that narrative part where it switches into, foreshadowing with an active narrator who is outside of the action. I also got one happy accident on another thread where I was building something. I said rewrite this in the literary style of Laini Taylor, more details, lush, evocative prose, epic fantasy. And it gave me this little snippet that's not actually connected to any story that I was working on. It's sort of like a really general epic fantasy thing about a protagonist in the world. But all of this writing is gorgeous. I really, really like it. I think anybody would read this and be impressed by the writing quality. So as an example of what GPT-4 is capable of, this is really lush, evocative scenery. So it is capable of the writing. It's capable of dialogue and description. It struggles a little more with organization and continuing a big story, but that's not going to be the case in the near future. I don't know when GPT-5 will come out, but even GPT-4 is going to have 20,000 words, so you could chunk out a pretty decent novel in 3 passes. And that would also give the AI more freedom to continue developing a story. I'm not sure it knows how to do that yet, although if it has been trained on all the books in the world, it should have a pretty good idea, and it will get smart enough to start to do things like that, to write a whole book on its own if you just tell it what to do. So it's kind of terrifying for authors because I'm working on my own books. I've been editing a book for a couple of months. It's going very, very slowly. I've got dozens of other books that I want to get to. And so I could not use AI at all and just keep plodding along and writing 3 or 4 books a year, and it'll take me a decade to finish everything. Or hypothetically, I could start using AI a lot and finish all of my projects quickly, which I feel a little bit pressured to do because I know there's going to be a lot of new competition. I know it's going to get a lot easier for less experienced authors to create better quality writing. I've been doing this for a long time. I have a PhD in literature. I'm not the best writer, but I kind of know what I'm doing because I've been doing it for a while. There's an opportunity for less experienced writers who haven't put in enough time to develop their skill yet to level up their writing really quickly, and then they can be publishing better quality stories more often. That's something I want to be aware of. That's why I'm interested in this technology, not because I love it for creative work, but because it's sort of a game changer. It's going to impact all of my own personal writing goals, and I want to know what's going on. The other thing I tried to do was move to another fantasy story. I have about 3 or 4 chapters of this that are decently written. They're not super polished, but I kind of got some of the story worked out. So I asked it to learn my style and continue the story, and it did that pretty well. It did flag this content. It said it was, may violate our content policy, and then it started writing right away. And it was actually confusing to me because it picked up my character names. It picked up a lot of the dialogue and stuff. I wasn't sure whether this was part of my story that I'd forgotten about. I had to double check this against my actual chapter because it's been a couple years since I've worked on it. And that's just to say that, this is close enough to my writing style that I didn't know for certain that I hadn't written this. So this part here, it was him, the trader, the one who exchanged books in my my straw craft. He had found a way to get to me to rescue me. That's what happens in my story. So I felt like I could have written that, but wasn't really sure if I actually had. So I had to start over. There's 6 sections. I asked it to wait until I'd posted all of the stuff. It started writing again. I had to stop it. It did that a couple times. It said, I apologize. So I had to keep correcting it. This time it says, thanks for providing the second section. I now have both writing samples. I've learned the style you've provided. Please let me know when you'd like me to start writing the continuation. So now it understands that it's waiting, and that's kind of what you have to do, is train it to wait until you've given it all the information. So here's the 3rd chapter. It also has a limitation of, I want to say, a couple thousand words. So you have to kind of break it down chapter by chapter. And even here, there's some rough stuff that I haven't really finished up. I have a few notes to myself in here that doesn't make any sense. I have some triple X's in replacement of a character name that I haven't figured out yet. So it's still a little bit rough. but this is the continuation from GPT-4. It does the thing where it gets ahead of itself too quickly, and partly because I haven't given an outline. I didn't tell it what to do in this chapter, which I would have needed to. So it has okay content, but it skips right into the explanation and the world building and the giving things away, which you want to resist when you're actually writing a novel. You want to not give away information, especially in the early chapters, because that'll just kill all the suspense and intrigue. So in this one, I wanted to try to figure out more of a system for writing an epic fantasy novel. So I asked it, how would I go about writing an epic fantasy novel with GPT-4? It gave me a breakdown of questions. These are pretty good questions I could ask myself. Like, this is a formula for writing a novel, which is pretty useful. I'll probably share this on my blog, but it's not exactly prompts. So this is just questions that an author could ask themselves to get clarity on their novel. So I tried to keep prompting it to get actual prompts that you could put into GPT-4 like this. And so in theory, you could create a premise, you could create a the genre, some main characters, a setting, a time period, maybe the twist or the main plot points. And then you could also prompt it to answer some of these questions, develop a unique ecosystem, develop a system of currency. It's really great for brainstorming and idea generation. So just to get, a stronger support system for your book without having to stop writing and then go, oh, I need some money. What am I going to do? You could generate a lot of content like this. So develop a group of friends or companions for your main character, describe their personality, skills, contributions to the story. That's pretty interesting. So I went back to my steampunk story and I put in that prompt, and now it's starting to write out character details. I just put up a really long article on Creativity about generating characters, questions to ask. And that works pretty well, where you can say, I need a name, I need an age, hobbies, interests. You could put in star sign or Myers-Briggs personality, likes and dislikes, things they love, things they hate, the types of clothes they wear, all sorts of stuff. You can have kind of a long character cheat sheet and put it into GPT-4, and it'll come up with a really nice character summary. But this is doing pretty well, and it's actually inventing some new characters. So rather than just having my two main protagonists, here now I have a gang, a group with names and everything. So it saves a lot of time with naming or character generation. And that's what I see most people using it for, not to write books, but just to, when you get stuck and you need to brainstorm without wasting so much creative energy, filling in gaps for secondary characters, it can create some content for you that's usable. This is, for example, one of my character profiles. So I asked it to generate some characters. It gave me the age, the appearance, hobbies, core beliefs, personality traits. So that's pretty useful. And then I did 10 more of those. So finally, in terms of other than idea generation and getting, backstory, content, character stuff, as a way to kind of quickly brainstorm your novel, I've actually seen some tools already. This is, right now, GPT-4 is the best out there because no one else is building on its API yet, but soon a lot of AI writing tools will be able to update to GPT-4. So things like Pseudo-Write, if you use Pseudo-Write or Jasper, they're going to have versions of this already. And the advantage of tools that are able to do it is, I played with one today that was kind of like a guided walkthrough. So you choose, pick a title, pick a main character, pick a premise, or let the robot do it for you. And it walked you through this process of developing the right information before it started working on the actual novel. So I think there will be things like that, tools that walk you through the process of developing the content and train the robot to do a better job at writing the first pass. But the other thing that I think it's really good for, and the thing that I think a lot of people will use it for, is editing and revision. It's already been a problem, as I've had an editing company for a long time. I've edited a lot of books, And it feels like a waste of time to focus on grammar mistakes and typos when I want to be doing, the really big, hard story problems and commentary to fix the book rather than just fix all the little mistakes. So you've had to use something like Grammarly to click one by one and go through and fix all of the little punctuation mistakes, which could be, hundreds of times in a novel. A tool like this is able to go through in one pass and fix all the errors. So it's pretty crazy for a first rough draft. It's really crazy for dictation if you dictate, because you're going to generate a lot of content that's missing a lot of punctuation. So if you just say act as a professional editor and proofreader, fix any typos or grammar and punctuation errors, it'll do a pretty good job of fixing typos, spelling mistakes. You'll probably have to check it. I think there's other tools that'll show you exactly what it fixed to be sure. I'm not sure if you would trust it to really do everything, but it does a pretty good job of catching most things. And then again, as an experiment, which I feel uncomfortable doing, but I wanted to show you the potential, you could have a longer prompt that says rewrite this in the literary style of, I wouldn't use one author, I'd combine maybe 5 different authors, so it sort of gets the right genre, but it won't actually be like any single author's unique style. I'm only choosing Laini Taylor because her writing really does stand out in terms of being beautiful and ornate, so it's kind of a really nice contrast. But it's sort of like a shortcut. Instead of using author names, which you should not do, you should just figure out what that actually means. So more details, lush evocative prose, epic fantasy. I could add more keywords here to describe the kind of work that I'm looking for, so that I can remove author names, which I think most authors should feel uncomfortable about using. But I asked it to rewrite this into style because this is a polished draft that I'm getting pretty close to publishing. So this is like not necessarily my best writing, but this is my writing style. It's pretty simple. It's not too fancy. I focus on the story. It's fine. But I wanted to see what it could do with the right prompts. So this is the same story and the same scene that I've already written. It's just rewritten in kind of purple prose, like fancy purple prose. Some writers and some readers might really like this example. I don't think it fits my author brand. I probably won't publish stuff like this, but I do appreciate the style because I think it's beautiful writing. It's just a little showy. I drew my hood low, shrouding my visage as I stole through the citadel, striding with a feigned nonchalance while my instincts urged me to vanish into the penumbral embrace of the shadows or hasten across the vast open plazas that yawned like chasms. At least they permitted some semblance of solitude, for there was no cause to huddle close. So all of this is good, fancy, more of like an epic fantasy style. And like I said, I wouldn't use specific author names in my prompts, and I wouldn't use this particular style. I'd have to do a lot of experimentation to find something that is like the style I aspire to, that's pretty similar to my actual writing, just a little bit better. Like if I could put in another 100 hours or 1,000 hours to make every word perfect, if I figure out the right prompts and right styles, I could theoretically rewrite all of my own books, which are pretty good and like they review pretty well, but they're not amazing. But I could just refresh them and rewrite them in a slightly improved style to get them a little more reader satisfaction, a little more beatific writing, not quite, fancy purple prose literary stuff, which I don't really enjoy in commercial fiction. But I do like this as an example because this is sort of like the far end of showy fancy writing versus. So I'm going to try this one where I say rewrite this in the literary style of Hemingway, short, clear, concise. Should give me a different style. So here's a Hemingway style, which again is the same story. It's just rewritten to be clear and concise and kind of simple. And this is also nice. If maybe I write a little bit too fancy and I want to condense and summarize. Maybe I have a huge messy manuscript and I want to make it clearer and concise. It does really good at like hooks. So certain tools, like for example, pseudo-write, you can rephrase one particular paragraph. And I think on Pro Writing Aid already, it allows you to rewrite a paragraph. So your first paragraph and your last paragraph of every chapter are really important, and every scene. Those are ones I might want to spin a few times to try to make it, give this a stronger hook, make this more dramatic. I have been working on my own tool, which is Ghostwriter. This is mostly for entertainment, educational purposes. I just wanted to see what was possible. So you can summon a spirit of a famous author to try to write in their style, which works reasonably well. I would have said that this was better than GPT 3.5 because I have some really heavy prompts on the back end doing the heavy lifting. But the cool thing is over here in the styles, I can edit this, so I can just put in my content and it'll automatically proofread it and just fix it. So for really rough stuff, a rough first draft, maybe if I'm, sprinting and I've got a few chapters but they're super unpolished, I could put it in and just clean it up. I think that's going to be really useful. But GPT-4 is probably better quality right now. I'll update this tool when, GPT-4 shares the API so that I try to stay up to date. But this tool also has some interesting stuff, like I can outline this. I can put my chapter and summarize it into an outline, or I can put in my outline and then it'll write the chapter from my outline. The Oracle will try to write the next chapter, so if I put in one chapter, it'll write the next one. I can get feedback, which is pretty useful, and I think for GPT-4, it actually is going to work really great. So I could pick a famous author and ask them to give me feedback as if they were critiquing my work, and it'll give you pretty clear, actionable writing tips. And then there's also some revision, rephrasing things. So I could pick a famous author and a style, expand, creative, dramatic. I could do show, don't tell if I want to just try to fix that. If you don't know what that means, it's difficult to learn how to do it well. I could also jump back and forth between present tense and past tense, first person and third person. Those are just useful features. I wanted to try to make this as useful as possible. I do think right now GPT-4 is probably better than the output that you would get on this site, but there's going to be a lot of new software coming up this year, which does kind of uncanny things. So regardless of whether or not you are comfortable or you're interested in writing a book with AI, I think there's a lot of areas that writers could use support, which typically has been time or cost prohibitive. I'm always usually in favor of lowering the barriers to entry so that more people can express their stories and have them reach a larger audience or larger marketplace. I think it's understandable to be excited and terrified of AI tools like this at the same time. So it's a really, confusing, controversial topic, but the quality of the writing that GPT-4 can put out is already publishable material. And since it can train on your writing style, like instead of putting in any other, it probably won't know your particular books because it won't, if you're not famous and you haven't sold a ton of copies. But it can learn your style. So you could put in a couple chapters to tell it what you want to do and then put in the rest of your outline to help it to finish up your book in your style. Anyway, hopefully this video is a little bit useful. I will be reviewing some of the writing software that's going to come out this year. I've got early access to a few things, so if you haven't subscribed, you might want to do that, or follow me on Creative Indie if you want to get all of the writing prompts. Right now I'm just in experimentation phase. I haven't written anything with AI, but I might start at least using it in a limited capacity for editing and revision, possibly for plotting and outlining some new projects. I haven't figured out that part yet, but I'll probably share my process as I go along. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.